All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to my talk about my A/B testing screw ups. There is a QR code that you can use to join the quiz. Um, but if you don't feel like joining right now, there will be multiple opportunities to do so. So, no rush. And let's get started. So, if you're asking who's this guy, I am asking that question myself sometimes, but I'm Daniel, software engineer at Slido, and I'm also doing some mentoring and consulting on the side. And in general, I'm a data-driven guy who also likes to do web accessibility, payments, and just in general, building great products. And yeah, I'm also, or trying to be a member, responsible member of the community. That means that I'm contributing to some projects like Solid UI, definitely type. I have my own libraries that I maintain. I try to help people on Stack Overflow and so on. Yeah. So if you haven't joined yet, this is the QR code to join the quiz. By the way, we have a nice prize pool. Well, it's not really a pool, there is just one item, so it's maybe one item sadly flowing in the pool, but it's a good item, I think. It's a small sample of Vietnamese coffee straight from Vietnam, and it's 100% Robusta. It's really good, by the way. Like I'm telling you, I'm not surviving the Austrian winter without this coffee. So the stakes are high. No, don't feel the pressure too much, and let's get started. So the first question is, if you are familiar with the A/B test, and the answers are either not at all, or you have perhaps heard about them, or you have run them yourself, or you are an expert. Okay, so most of you know what the tests are about, but not all of you. Perfect. Nice, thank you. So that tells me that we shouldn't skip this part. So let's talk about what is an A/B test. A/B test is a method to compare like two variants of the same page or of a feature, and you compare them to figure out which one is better and which one offer in turn to your users. And the way it works is that you can see on this picture on the right that you get like different experience for version A and different experience for the version B. You then split your users into two groups randomly, and they get the version per allocation, right? And then you measure some metrics like how much people purchased your product, how much people clicked through your buttons, right? How active were they? And based on this, you figure out if the variant A or the variant B is better. And if, let's say, the variant B is better, then you release it to 100% users. So far, so good? Is that understandable? Perfect. There is some lingo on the side. We don't call it like A and B, but we call A control. That's like the baseline. A is something that you usually already have. And B, we call that treat. That's the new experience, right? That's the thing that you are testing if it is better than the baseline, yeah? And then the other part is metrics. Those are the things that you are measuring. And for the purpose of this talk, we can divide them into two categories. Goal metrics, those are the ones that you are trying to improve, okay? So they should get better. And guardrail metrics, those are the ones that you are not necessarily trying to make better, but they shouldn't get worse. Okay, cool. And since most of you are engineers, we need some JavaScript. It's called ViennaJS, so we couldn't do without it. This is how it looks in the code, like the simplest example. What you want to do as an engineer, you want to find out which variant the user is assigned to. So you get like a value here, either treat or control. And based on that, you either do something or show something different per group, right? So group treat gets something else than group control in the else. And then the last part, you must not forget about that. You got to track it with your tracking service, right? Because you need to measure how they are behaving, in which group they belong, and what's their overall experience. As my colleague says, track everything, thank me later. So, and then like the last part, for the A/B test is evaluation. So you basically get like a table of all the metrics that you were interested in, and then you can see which metrics were positively affected and if this effect is significant or not, right? And based on which metrics got better, which got worse, you make the decision. Okay, do we stay with the control or do we go with the new experience with the treat? Okay, so this is for the theory. Any questions so far? Anything not understandable? Looks like everybody is on top of their game. So let's just start with it. Let's just start with the screw-ups, because this is something that people are usually interested in, especially if the screw-ups are not yours. It's something that one can listen to all day. So let's start with mine. And I'll be telling that like a story, because we started A/B testing 3 years ago, and I will be telling you what were the challenges that we faced from the beginning up to, well, today. And the screw-up number one is that we thought in the beginning that A/B test is just a formality. Like, let's measure the numbers, let's measure how good we are, as Fry is saying here, so that management can put it into their charts. But we were so sure, like, when we create a new feature, it's a new, fresh design, right? It's full of new ideas. It's supposed to work better than the old experience, right? That's just logical. So we are so sure of us. And now we are coming to the quiz. So if you haven't joined yet, you have the last chance now to win the Vietnamese coffee. So let's wait for more participants joining. Okay, we got 15. Okay. It's me, it's you. Okay, 23, 24. Okay, looks like everybody's hot, so let's do it. So the first question is, what percentage of A/B tests is successful on average? And by successful, I mean that the new experience is indeed better than the old one.
Does it also mean that they apply the variant, or just like evaluate that this one would be better?
Just that they evaluate it, right?
Okay.
That they evaluate that the new experience is better than the old experience. So how often are the A/B tests successful? In 80% of the times, 60% of the times, 35 or 15? What do you guys think? It's not a trick question, no worries. Not this one anyway. All right, so I'll wait a couple more seconds and yeah, let's see the results. And I didn't fool you. I'm kind of disappointed, but at the same time, I'm proud of you, of course. And it's indeed 15%, just 15%, which means in more than 80% of cases, the treat is actually worse than the control, right? That goes to show you that we are just guessing, even though we think like new design, new, better ideas.
Maybe just show the overall trend that we feel like software is getting worse.
Well, let's not get into that topic, maybe later in the Q&A. But yeah, it can be also indicative of that maybe. But yeah, it goes to show you that a lot of times we are just guessing. We are failing all the time. And don't take my word for it, the big tech says so, like Google, Microsoft, Netflix. They are all having those kinds of numbers. I think us in Slido, we have like maybe 90% failure rate. So that tells you that it's pretty close. And what's the learning then? The learning is that you should make your tests as cheap as possible, right? Because you'll be failing a lot. You need to iterate, you need to try the things all over again because you fail. And how do you do that? There are a couple of ways to do that. Either you can have like fake logic. Yeah, something looks like it's dynamic, it's not. It's hard-coded, but the user doesn't know, so why not? You can cut corners, like your design doesn't have to be perfect, or not all features need to be implemented like fully. Or you can just verify interest, like when somebody on checkout page clicks pay with Apple Pay and you just display them a modal window saying thanks for your interest. Don't go that far, right? You don't want to piss your users off, but it's also one method. Cool. Coming into number 2. performance is always worth improving. Like, who would think otherwise, right? And I have a nice anecdote regarding that. So we were working on this lovely checkout page over here, and I noticed that the card form for the credit card details was loading pretty slow. So I thought, let's make it faster and let's let everybody know how better we can do, right? Increase the conversion rate, etc. So I spent quite some time working on that, and in the end, I made it like 1 second faster, or maybe more. And you web developers out there, you know that this is kind of a lot of time, right? It's pretty faster. But in the end, nobody gave a damn. 0 conversion rate improvement once we ran the A/B test. Like, nobody cared. And 3 weeks of developer time gone because I had to rewrite the whole thing. So that goes to show you that if you do such a performance improvement, you should know that it's going to have some impact, right? That is probably pretty expected, but how do you do that? Whoops, AdBlock is telling me that I should. Sorry, AdBlock just interrupted my presentation, but we are back. So how do you verify that your performance improvement would have an impact, right? That's a question. And the practice from the big tech, so again, Google, Netflix, and so on, tells us that the cheap way to find out is slow down the feature that you want to improve. Kind of like counterintuitive, but you get to measure how much the conversion rate gets worse, right? And now, word of caution, don't like overdo it. If your web page loads like 10 seconds slower, you are gonna find out some interesting numbers, but nobody's gonna return, so be careful with that. But let's say that you found out that minus 10% in conversion rate with the slowdown of 1 second. And the practice, like the experience, tells us that you can expect roughly the same effect when you make it by the same amount faster. Now, take this with a grain of salt. This is not mathematically provable or anything. That's just the experience. It can be like very different from that number. So maybe the improvement is not going to be like 10%, but maybe 5%, right? But it still goes to show you, like if I have done that for this checkout page and I found out, yes, it's 1 second slower, but the conversion rate hasn't moved at all, I would know nobody's going to care about the improvement probably, right? So that's the nice learning here. And this is also very cheap to set up, of course. Like slowing things down is very easy, you know that. Okay, so like a challenge number 3, we didn't know which improvements are realistic and which ones we should like aim for. And for you experts out here, we are using a frequentist approach. And for this one, you need to know the expected improvement up front so that you can like decide what sample size you need. So we didn't know that, we had no idea. And here comes the question number 2. So get ready. And the question is, how high is a meaningful improvement? Like how much is meaningful? So is it more than 0.2%? Is it more than 2%? Is it 10%? Is it all of them? Or is it contextual? Oh, maybe. Okay, 20 people voted. I'll wait a couple more seconds. Cool, so let's see the results. And I guess I haven't fooled. I'm even worse than in the first one, but yeah, you are too good. So it's really contextual. But maybe not everyone knows why it's contextual or what's the context that is relevant. And it depends really on the kind of company that you are working in. If you are a startup, you need to survive, you need to grow fast, you need to make it to the next round of financing, right? And then you are looking at like 10%, 20%, heck, even 100% improvements, right? Because why not? It's different for established businesses, especially for the big ones with a lot of users, a lot of revenue. There even 0.2% can make a huge difference, and you can suddenly make like multiple millions of dollars just thanks to that little improvement, right? But then in that context, it's kind of hard to score the bigger improvements, and that can happen to you maybe once in a few years. So don't be sad if you are working for a big company and you're not rocking it like in a startup. It's fine, it's expected. But what is the learning out of those? It's interesting, but what is the practical learning? The practical learning is that you don't need to be Google to run A/B tests, right? That was the argument of my manager back then, that yeah, we are no Google, we are no Microsoft, we don't have that many users, we can't run A/B tests. But this is not true. Like in statistics, like the smaller the difference you wanna see or detect, the more users you need, right? Because you need more statistical power. But the bigger the difference is, the less user you need. So for those improvements like 10, 20, even 100%, you're fine with maybe a couple of thousands of users, right? So this is very good. This tells you that no matter the company size, well, except for the very early stages for startup, because startup doesn't care that much about A/B tests anyway in the early stages, you are good to use A/B tests, right? Okay, this is my favorite one, or the most hated one, depends on the day, and that's believing in too good results, like being too naive, right? So again, a little story time. This is like the new checkout page that we created in Slido, and we had an old one which is kind of outdated. It wasn't that trustworthy. So we created this improved version, and then we ran A/B test. Okay, how much better does it improve? And I saw some amazing results. 23% uplift in the conversion rate. So that's massive, right? That never happens. And what did I do? I went to the company chat and wrote everybody, like, guys, we have 20% conversion uplift. The results are significant, which means haters gonna hate, just trust me. And everybody was chanting my name. I felt famous. I was getting used to becoming a celebrity, you know, until I wasn't. Because then I immediately got my cold shower. Because of course, people started asking exactly this question. How is that possible that you, with a simple redesign, well, it wasn't that simple, but who cares? You achieved 20% uplift. That's like, that never happens. And of course they were right. We had a problem in our tracking or in our evaluation that happens all the time. And I just made a fool of myself. Well, happens. To be fair, by the way, we actually scored 10% uplift, which is still huge, right? That usually doesn't happen. But yeah, first impressions matter, and I still felt pretty bad. I wish that I had back then like this paper bag that you can put on your head and just chill, but wasn't my case. But either way, it was a great learning, which brings me to this thing called Twyman's Law. I don't know why it's called after Tony Twyman, the market researcher, because apparently he has never said that, but still, it rings well. And the law says that any figure that looks interesting or different is usually wrong. So if I went back to my example and I saw this 20% uplift, I should have like had another look and verified, right? So what's the learning? Really be careful with that send button, especially in company chat. And on a more serious note, if you see such a number, recheck your tracking, recheck your evaluation, or rerun the test even, because why not? If you recreate the same results, you can be sure that those are reproducible and those are real, okay? Cool. Number 5, concluding A/B tests too soon or too late. So this is the next question. So let's see what you think. Let's see if I can fool you or not. So for how long to run most A/B tests? Is it 3 to 5 days, 1 to 2 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, or until we see a significant difference? Tricky. Yeah. There is no word context that would guide you. So 15 votes in. Yeah, 18, 20. So let's wait a couple more seconds. Okay, the pressure is real. All right, let's see the results. Let's see them. Okay, and oh, it's kind of even. So until we see a significant difference, but you got to be careful with this one. Yeah, it's really 1 to 2 weeks, and this might be controversial, but hear me out. Uh, Again, word of caution: this is not applicable to every A/B test. If you are doing medical trial, imagine COVID vaccines. Do you think it would convince anybody if you ran it just for 1 week? Probably not. But in our business, where not that much is in stake, 1 to 2 weeks is usually fine. And here comes the reason why. So after 2 weeks, like the pool of users who haven't yet seen your A/B test is much smaller, right? After 2 weeks, it's much smaller, and that means that the influx of new users who haven't seen the test is really radically dropping, right? So if you are like after 2 weeks thinking we are not there yet, let's prolong by 1 week, let's say, it might be easily 2 weeks or 3 weeks until you see something, if you see any difference at all. And the second big reason is that the feedback loop is too long, right? Imagine you're a developer, you develop something, you run the A/B test, then you wait 4 weeks, let's say, and then you get the results and you are supposed to act on it and iterate. It's impossible, right? Because you started something else, everybody went on, and you don't know what we are even talking about in those results. So 2 weeks is kind of the sweet spot, something that you want to aim for most of the time. And the learning, something that I didn't mention, something that is between the lines, is that you should complete in the A/B test the current period, right? So you should complete the current week in this example, because the week captures seasonality. Your users might behave differently on work days and on the weekends, for example, right? Depends on your business, but it's always safer to capture the whole periods. And the second learning is, if you even after those 2 weeks or 3 weeks even see no significant difference, it probably means there is no difference to be found. So you might just retry or recheck your approach and try something different and run next A/B test. Okay, experts or people in general are gonna know, but this is something that captures survivorship bias. And my mistake, my screw up was not knowing about this bias. So let's see. The anecdote is from Second World War, and Allied planes were flying from Great Britain over Germany, dropping some bombs, getting shot at, and then they returned to the air bases, right? And the British engineers have marked those areas that were shot the most with those red dots. So you can see on the fuselage, on the wings, and so on. And they were about to add armor on those areas, which is logical, right? That's what everybody would do. Somebody's already shaking their heads because they know. But then this guy, Abraham Waldo, came around and he said, no, we have to do the opposite. And people know why, like some people know. And his reasoning was pretty simple. Yes, those red areas were getting hit a lot, but those planes still made it back to Britain, right? But those that were hit into the engines or into the cockpit, those were the ones that never made it back for inspection, right? So those people who already knew, that's nothing new, but for me, when I saw it, it showed me two things really, that in statistics or in A/B testing, things that look logical on the first glance, they can actually be the opposite of what the truth is, right? That's the first thing. And the second thing is that with survivorship bias, you got to be really careful, because if they really added the armor like in those places or here, then yes, they would make the life a bit more comfortable for those who are getting in those places, like hit in those places. But those who would be hit here into the engines, into the cockpit, it would do nothing for them, right? They would still never make it back. And that's how it looks in the practice as well in our business. So imagine we are running an A/B test on YouTube, and the control group is pretty clear. Users are coming to YouTube, they are interacting, they're watching videos, writing comments, purchasing stuff. And we then measure how they are behaving, like what are those metrics for them. There's one caveat. The users are, of course, a mix. So a smaller part might be very motivated. They are really invested into the product. They want to use it. And then there's like a larger part of users who are not that motivated, right, to use the product. They are not that invested. And for Treat, let's say we are testing a brilliant idea, and that is before we let the users watch the videos, we display like a preference form. You know, who are you? Are you a student or are you a professional? And what are your preferences? What kind of videos you like, right? And the idea goes like, when we know this information, we can offer more tailored content and get better metrics, right? Sounds pretty, I think, pretty bad already, but let's say that this is the idea. But what we are not seeing is that we are losing those less motivated people here, right? Let's say those people are already like fed up with advertisement on YouTube, and Theo Brown stopped posting the rants, so there is nothing to be seen on YouTube. And then we get this preference form, like we have had enough. We are out of here, right? And then, so the less motivated people are gone, and then you are only left with the survivors here. There was a question? No? Yeah, no problem. Okay, so you're only left with survivors here, and then again, they interact, they watch videos, they buy items, whatever, and you again measure how they fare. But where's the problem with this? The problem is, yeah?
You need to measure how many people left when they saw the questionnaire.
Exactly, that's the problem, right? So if you are just checking how people are active on average, in this group, you have still the less motivated people here who dilute the metrics, right? But here you have just the survivors. Those are more active, more, let's say they are purchasing more, they are leaving more comments, they are just more active, and they leave better metrics, right? So just by judging this, you would think that the Treat group is better, and you would release it to the public, and it would be a major mistake because you would lose a lot of users in the process. So as our colleague said very well, the solution is pretty simple. You just have to track the whole process, right? You have to track the users from the very moment they join your application or they connect to your application. And then if you track like all the steps, you would see, yeah, a lot of people are coming to the preference form, but not many people are actually coming to the product, right? So this is definitely something to take away from this. And that also means in practice, like you have to pay attention to your guardrail metrics and of course set them up as well. Like the guardrail metric in this case would be how many people are making it still to the product, right? Cool, and now we are coming to the last question, kind of a lighter one. And that's, with all the experience that we gathered, are we still failing in A/B tests regularly? And the answers are, no, we are much better now, or absolutely, but with smile on our faces. It's just kind of a cliche, but let's go with it. 25 votes in, so let's wait a couple more seconds. Cool. So of course, I fooled no one, and those 3% people are just trolling, that's fine. And let's see who won. It's Florian, all answers correct, and he was the fastest. So give it up for Florian. Florian, you won yourself a nice sample of coffee. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy. And yeah, so this is it. And why do we have a smile on our face? It must be still frustrating, right? Fail all the time. But that's because the learning from A/B tests is at least as important as the results themselves. Thank you, guys. Yeah, those are some resources. And I don't know, yeah, there's Q&A. So There are some questions. I see some smiley faces here. Can it be that the failure rate of A/B tests is that high because humans just hate change? It can very well be. Yeah, this is something that definitely has to be overcome in certain scenarios. And there you have to allow yourself like some period, which is called learning period, which has this adverse effect, and only start taking the results into account after this period, right? So that this effect wears off. I hope that answered your question, Max. I don't know where Max is. Yes.
He did.
Thank you. Perfect. Good question. The next question is, I have to mark it like this, yeah. How do you run A/B tests and enable your marketing team to set those up with minimal client-side code? Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it, right? So we always, as engineers, try to do the features as simple as possible. So that's for the client-side code. And the marketing team doesn't have that much to do with that because there are some caveats along the way. We, for example, learned that when you have a paid advertisement for your experiment, let's say for the treat version, and you are running that on a platform that like automatically puts more budget into the version that performs better, where there's more traffic, then this is already interfering with your A/B test, right? Because it is, again, kind of a survivorship, but no, it's preferring one variant over the other. So it skews your result. And let me see if there is something more to answer. Did it answer your question, Daria, or is there more?
Kind of.
Kind of? Okay. How do you run A/B tests and enable your marketing team to set those up?
Like my other question is like I have a constant battle with the marketing team because
Yeah.
I'm their enemy because I tell them please stop installing third-party JavaScript things.
Yay.
That's a good call.
And they hate me because they just want to do something. And
Yeah.
A very simple thing is sometimes we have two landing pages. We want to A/B test which one is better.
Mm-hmm.
And they want something to perform this test.
Yeah.
But I really don't want them to install even more JavaScript into the browser.
Yeah,
That's my
yeah,
question.
yeah, that is challenging. Like, of course, it's also kind of slowing your site down for certain users. And it's also bad if you have like two landing pages and to get to the second one, to the treat variant, you have to do a redirect. So if you do that redirect, for example, that already puts your treat variant into a huge disadvantage. And usually those tests fail as a result.
But what do you use mostly? Is it like a library or like how would you go about like in for example in your payment page you had this call to your like
Yeah.
checking thing. Where would that run usually for you? Like do you care about that?
So if you're asking about like the A/B testing library,
Yes.
so for that, you either have something like a Posthawk or Growthbook. Those are the products that really implement the whole feature flagging and A/B testing and the evaluation and so on. So you would use those. And I recommend this path because we have our own implemented solution and it is so much pain and such a huge commitment that nobody see that in the beginning. And if they saw it, they would really abandon it fast. Like, it doesn't pay off for most companies, except for the biggest ones. Cool. So let's go to the next one. Thanks for that question. How do you make sure, okay, let's mark it. How do you make sure your measurements are free from biases, like only getting responses from users without script blockers? Yeah, okay, you mean like without, okay, yeah, so we don't really have this problem because we have our custom solution, which the script blockers don't know about, so the requests are fine. But then, yeah, like the simplest solution is to, well, I think there was this case where somebody argued that the A/B testing cookies, for example, are functional, so that means necessary. And this is unfortunately not true. You have to opt into those. And then you, of course, need to allow them first. And you need a platform that can like incrementally, randomly assign users into variants, like on the fly, right? So that you don't get like 40% in one variant and 60% in the other, because that would be a mismatch. So yeah, there are multiple strategies, depends on what you are using. Any follow-up questions or do you need more? Okay, perfect. Thanks. How many iterations? Okay, I always forget about marking it. How many iterations of one A/B test do you usually do? Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on the idea, so how big the idea is or how many ways to achieve it there are. We had like one notion, one idea where we ran, I think, 10 different A/B tests until we finally gave up, basically. But sometimes you just need two or just one. It depends on the feature, on the idea, right? Sometimes you're lucky, many times you're not, so you have to iterate. Depends. Fine. One from David. Do you split the group 50-50 for the A/B test? Or do you try it also on smaller audiences? And how do you select smaller user groups without skewing the results? Yeah, that's a good question. It depends. So if the feature is like risky and you can't afford to put it on this many users, you do like a gradual rollout. Let's say you roll it out to 10% of users. You are looking for alerts. And if those are fine, after like 3 hours, you go more, like 20%, let's say. And then once that is fine, you really kick it off after a few hours again, and you put it on all of your users.
So you do it like releases of app versions as well, like incremental rollouts, the same for A/B testing then?
Yeah, you shouldn't, but we do that because of our custom solution. But what you want to do is you want to have like a dashboard where you just increase the number and the product takes care of the rest. Like you don't have to release in that case. That would be like ideal.
Cool.
So that's how we do it. And without skewing the results, this is something that you don't have to like care that much about because if your algorithm for the randomization, that means for assigning users to different variants, is good, that means every user has the same chance to get to control and the same chance to get to treat. You don't care because this is taken care of already by the algorithm.
Makes sense, thank you.
Thank you too. Okay, next one. If you sometimes worsen performance to measure the difference and assume it's possible, why not use a simple regression model to predict it instead of guessing? Yeah, it's never like simple with the regression models. Like you can use it, but the level of certainty is of course a little smaller or lower. But of course you can. There are legitimate cases where you don't want to use A/B tests, and then the regression model or some, let's say, period analysis. Well, how's it called? I forgot the name, but it's a legitimate method. But this is called pseudo experimental because it's not really experimental, right? You are not comparing two equal groups in the same time, right? So that's the caveat.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
That's my question. I just wanted to clarify a bit because you misunderstood it. You said that sometimes we can just worsen the feature that we want to actually make faster, and then predict that basically we will have the same or a bit smaller improvement if we make it faster than we have worsened. So the thing is, if you make it worsen, like let's say website loading, you make it slower by a second or by 2 seconds, there is difference. Instead of guessing, just I hope it will be better in the same way it was worse. We can basically choose like 10 groups of 10 people, then choose 10 points, make it slower for 1/10 of a second, for 2/10 of a second, and so on, and basically guess the function and predict how better it will be.
You can, but there is one big problem with that approach, and that is that in each group you have too few users, and you will not get statistically significant results out of that.
If it's Google, like you have a lot of users.
Yeah.
In 10 groups.
If it is Google, then yes, they can afford doing that. Maybe it's also dependent on the product, but yeah, maybe they can. But most of us, like mere mortals.
I mean, you talked about YouTube, where it's actually meaningless.
Yeah, that's fair.
Improve any function instead of just removing ads.
Let's not go into that. But yeah, it's definitely a valid case to not run just two variants, but multivariant tests where you have multiple those variants and do comparisons between those. But really, you have to have a lot of users for that or more users, or it takes longer to get the statistical significance, right? If you don't have that many as Google. But yeah, you can do it. It's definitely a way. Okay, so thanks for that question. And this one is also from Max. So what would be the popular documented methodologies for A/B tests? Because without a methodology, any result is meaningless and comparable to an educated guess. Yeah, so methodology, I'm not sure what you mean exactly by that, but if you mean like the evaluation methods.
Evaluation method, how do we split groups, how do we measure all of that, like how do we know that what we are measuring actually makes sense, and so
Yeah.
on, so on. Like there are huge books on that, because
Yeah.
I mean, you said in your presentation that that's not mathematically correct or something. I'm not a mathematician, so I'm just
Mhm.
questioning the things that are very important to me.
Yeah.
The method of testing, the statistics of that, and so on, so on, so on.
Mhm.
And if we don't do it in the framework, or in a very strictly defined framework of criteria and basically evaluation methods, then in a lot of cases we will actually just treat the results as guesses. Like for example,
Mhm.
if we say
Yep.
improvement in this feature doesn't make sense, and we stop improving it, but actually we know that this feature is not it does not depend on some linear growth. There is a threshold, so we just have to improve it until this, and then nobody cares, and it's known for many years. Then why do we care? So
Yeah.
are there any like books or any sources with all of that data that we look it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the previous slide, I had the resources page, and there is one really good book that I recommend. That's called Controlled Online Experiments from Ron Kohavi. So I can recommend that one for sure. And there are some good blogs for companies or from companies that really create products in this ecosystem, like Statsig, Posttalk, and so on. So I recommend those. And to your question, of course, you need some framework. You need some statistically sound framework for running the A/B tests. If you are using like the Growthbook or Posttalk product that I mentioned, those do that already for you. You don't have to care that much about those. If you are doing that yourself, of course, you're on a thin ice. You got to have the statistics down. Yeah, and then you need to really think about the methods and methodologies that you are using. Like, I wouldn't recommend frequentist in most cases. I would recommend Bayesian, right? That's a good start. You have to be really sure about how you handle your tracking and how you evaluate, because there is also a lot of room for error. It's not easy, yeah. So better to use those products that take care of everything. Perfect. So if that is okay, do you have more coffee? Good question.
You don't drink coffee.
So it's a trick question. Yeah, let's see. Let's see. Maybe next time, if there is anything left after the fierce Austrian winter, then I'll definitely maybe bring some with me as well.
Very good. Huge round of applause for Daniel.